Well, good afternoon. This is another amazing Thursday with Bill and his band of merry candle lighters and world better makers and all that good stuff. You are actually listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. This podcast, we're in, I think this is our 54th or 55th episode. And to me, that's kind of both interesting, and it also basically means that we're just getting our finger, wet at this point in an ocean of possibility in terms of conversation. So again, just to reiterate, we're doing this so that the listener, you at home, have something to take out into the world today that's useful for you, if it is, and maybe makes you think a little bit differently, or gives you pause in a conversation that normally you might be disempowered to be a part of. So if one of those things happens for you, even just one person, we will have got our job done here. So in the last half hour, we talked about, cooperation and collaboration, and then compromise. And so you're going to have to listen to the other half-hour podcast to really get into the detail on that. But now we're starting to look into what we were talking about in the 70s and the 80s. We had all of these brilliant minds, these men and women that were born, in the late 1890s, everybody from Bucky Fuller or Joseph Campbell. There's a long list of all of these people that were great philosophers, and they lived what they preached. They spoke from the experience of their lives. And at some point they got to this level and they said, we're playing too small, as a race. We're not getting it, we're not really understanding what is possible if we drop the rules and we start playing the bigger game. So that gave us rise to, some of the hybrid words that came out, like synergy, which is synchronicity, or synchronized energy, or all that sort of thing, but in a different context. We're now talking about, with synergy. Well, I don't know what we're talking about. What do you, my guest hosts, Melissa and Ken, think about those two words?
I think that there's something to be said about finding common ground with other people, and finding sometimes things just fit really well together. And sometimes I think you can really build upon that. So when I say that, I'm like, when I think about my groups, I think that we're better together, if that makes any sense, because we don't know what we don't know. So by gaining information, knowledge, experiences from other people, you get to see a bigger piece of the pie, so to speak. You get to see more information, and then you can make better decisions. And as you're saying, light the candle for a better world, you can create a better world. But we can't do it single-handedly. We have to do that as a community, as something that we do together.
Excellent. So would anybody like me to give you a couple of definitions here, so that we're standing on what we can find on the internet and our listeners can find on the internet? So synergy is a noun, and it's the interaction or cooperation of two or more organizations, substances, or other agents to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. I like that. Said differently, it can also mean combined value and performance of two companies or two people will be much better than if they did something on their own. Layman's term, essentially, that's the old 2 + 2 doesn't have to equal 4. Sometimes in the old days, especially under compromise, 2 + 2 can equal 2.5. And this is not a great outcome. And people need to be trained, to look for the potential for how do we blow the lid off of this thing. So let's talk about synchronicity for a second. It's also a noun. and it's the simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal connection. So it's almost like happenstance that these really cool things are happening at the same time, you know?
And that was another great mind. That's Carl Jung,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that
Lying, I'll
kind
swear
of coined that phrase. Yeah.
So the whole idea of, Ken, are you familiar with the story of the 100th monkey?
No.
That, given an island and given a population of monkeys, and a lot of palm trees with, coconuts and that sort of thing up in them, that if there's a problem with getting the coconuts down from the tree, or there's a problem with opening the coconut, or there's a problem with anything associated with how they eat, essentially, given 100 monkeys, the 100th monkey will just by happenstance find a solution to any problems that are there. Given a population that's diverse, and say 3 different populations of 100 monkeys around an island, the same thing will occur in those cultures as well at the same time, which is one of the main reasons that when we go back and we look throughout history, how mathematics involved, for example, that is a pure 100 monkey type of an occurrence, where China, South America, the Middle East, all those different people came up with the same language with regard to mathematics. Okay, they may have had different languages, but every last one of them figured out how to make a pyramid. Every last one of them figured out what right angles and all the rest of that sort of thing, do geometry, algebra, what have you, and without necessarily informing each other. Now, there may be a correction to that, and it may be mythology, but it is an example of how, given populations, given the problems that they're looking to solve, they're going to figure it out in the same way. So now we've got synchronicity. And would you like to say some more about that, above and beyond, just the happenstance occurrence of 2 things that don't seem to be going together, but actually make all the difference in the world for each other?
Well, it feels like it's an attention, an intentioned attention, I guess you could say. Like, where's your center of gravity? Are things happening to you, like kind of the victim mindset where you're in that survival mode? Are you, like a lot of entrepreneurs, hustle and grind, go, make it happen? Or are you in a place of we consciousness where you're recognizing opportunities for collaboration, value? And like the thing that it triggered was Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach. He talks about the best thing you can do in business is solve your competitors' problems for them. And, and that's a very interesting mindset. When you start thinking that way, I would imagine you'll start paying attention differently to things that could lead to, synchronicity. So, because you're looking for it, and now whether it makes sense or not matters less than the feeling that there's something worth pursuing here that could lead to that greater outcome for everyone involved.
Yeah. Melissa?
Yeah, I like what you said, Ken. That we mentality really makes a huge difference. Like even in my breakfast clubs, the breakfast club is not me or about me; it's about us, right? I mean, people come back not because of me; it's because of all of us. And so, when people have created those connections, it's powerful. I think somebody in the group said today that that the Breakfast Club was one of those groups that stayed together throughout the whole pandemic, and it was because of the strong connections and relationships we had to begin with, and we needed each other. We still wanted to be and see each other every couple of weeks, and so I think that really is a we mentality. Even if it's just to see each other. So.
That's so great because my personal experience, I can tell you that I ditched a couple of the organizations that I had put tremendous amount of energy into, and as a result of uh, a missing we, like not present in terms of where we are going, etc. It just made a lot of sense for me to like get out of the way and go put my energy and focus into some other things where people were basically saying, how do we keep performance up? How do we keep, so for instance, the network side of it, I stopped the ninjas for about 6 months. And the main reason for that is that the ninjas is all about collaboration and synergy. It is not interesting to me to go to Zoom meetings and talk to people every 2 weeks or every month and nothing comes of it. Nothing's created. We didn't do any new events. We didn't, go out and visit clients together. We didn't have a happy hour somewhere where everybody brings one of their favorite clients or somebody that they want to get to know better. And we leverage credibility by having people around us that are credible in that situation. And then, wow, that was a lot of fun. Is this what you do for a living? I had no idea, So the synergy part of it is where those unexpected outcomes, we have in the cooperation and collaboration an opportunity for breakthroughs, right? I say that synergy stands on top of the breakthroughs. When breakthroughs start to be ordinary, they start to be something that is not planned for, like it's the end zone, but is just, we're going to continue here. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep building and have fun while we're doing it. And we're doing it together. And we can't do it apart, And that's not something that's an unhealthy, we can't do it apart. It's called, if you bring what you got and I bring what I got, whatever the situation calls for, we're going to bring out stuff the other person didn't even know we had, Mm-hmm. So that synergy part and how we start to break down barriers and how we start to, talk about, you don't talk about inclusivity in those types of situations. You're too busy just having fun with each other creating. You know what I mean, Ken?
Yep, I do. Well, and it can be, it can be challenging, especially from a leadership role if you have fear of a loss of control. So, I see that in a lot of situations, even for a manager. If you're opening space, you don't know what's going to go into that space. And we would see it in Quester's Way. We promoted creativity and ideas and all of that collaboration. And sometimes the seed that came out of it was chaos, and that was okay. We had to make sure that, we had that trusted culture where, the only mistake is not lack. We'll figure this out. Thanks for being brave enough to try something. Now we got to deal with the consequences, obviously, but we'll learn from it and move forwards. So it's interesting how I think that part of it, how comfortable is someone with letting go of what they're holding onto to let something else take its place and still feel that they're valued and a part of it, and it hasn't like passed them by or becomes a threat. And so there's a lot of noise like that can kind of come in, even a familial unit. So many parents, their kid becomes a teenager and all of a sudden they think they know everything. They're starting to empower themselves. How do you balance that? And fear that they're going to hurt themselves, or they start saying things that are hurt, whatever, So it's an interesting dynamic that gets created. I could see that either amplifying that feeling of synchronicity or basically diminishing it.
Well, see, the whole thing that you're talking about is these are not applicable thoughts. These are not, like I'm going to go out and whip a little synchronicity on my business today, or hey man, let's have a synergy meeting, It's like, no, that's not it. the distinction between managing and leading. We manage things and we lead people. And then we, embrace a culture where leadership shows up where it's supposed to show up in any instance. Of course, there are other times, where you have to pull somebody aside and say, man, I love what you're doing, and I don't mind you getting out in front of me, but maybe not quite that far out in front of me. Do you think other people are following, or do you think they're a little bit confused? Do you have a little bit of cleanup on aisle 7 to go back and take care of here and get people, back in lockstep with you because they love you, It's that whole idea of the empowerment. Suddenly, the things that you will take for granted and breathing in and breathing out is just that stuff. It's the stuff of, we can do anything. What are we doing next? Where are we going today?
Well, I think what's interesting too in talking about this is how comfortable people are with things that don't go exactly how you expected them to. And a lot of people encapsulate that into something called failure. And sometimes failure, I think, is actually a really good word because it allows you to be better. So I know, and sometimes I get feedback from a Breakfast Club member, about how I could have handled something differently and stuff. And I never get upset. I'm always encouraging people. People are so afraid to say anything negative. And I'm like, I don't really look at it as negative. I may or may not agree or may not change something based upon, whatever, for whatever reason, but I'm always embracing it. And I always kind of incorporate that in, because if you can't do that, you can't get better.
Yeah. So the leader creates an environment where that's an invitation all the time. And suddenly it's not awkward anymore, like we were talking about hugging, a few minutes ago. When people are getting energy from positive comments, and of course there'll be people in the room that every time they open their mouth, it doesn't sound positive, does it? On occasion. So, but those turn out to be the people, if it doesn't sound positive to you, they turn out to be mostly the people that you have the greatest opportunity to grow from their comments, as funny as that might seem. So in terms of our organizations, we're all blessed because we have been in leadership positions. We have had hundreds of people looking to us, for direction. And when I learned in business, when I was working for other people and I had large groups of people, I couldn't afford for them to stand around, trying to figure out what Bill would do or what Bill, needs to have approval for. And there were 3 of us managers. I was materials manager, the final assembly and test manager, who had to make sure everything that went to final goods for shipping worked 100%. And then the assembly and manufacturing manager. And we just had this distinction called handle it. Okay. So that was our code for, I trust you, and whatever decision you're going to make on this is either going to be the right one or you're going to get a great lesson out of it. Okay. So go get her done, handle it. And I ran into my dear friend who was the FAT manager, final assembly and test. And the first time, I hadn't seen him in 20 years, and we walked up to each other. We both had this big old grin on our face, and I looked at him. I said, Larry, handle it. And we both broke up laughing. But so it's all about, casting, your self-doubt aside. As the leadership role is something that has to be tested on a daily basis. It's like, how do you know a boat floats? You got to put it in water, right?
Yep.
That's right. And if it sinks, it's not a failure. It just means now I figured out a way to make it more seaworthy. I mean, it's like
feedback.
Yeah, it's like, this is good. Now I won't drown.
Yeah. The sentence becomes, well, that didn't work. Now what? Yeah, we were intending for that to float for a little while, and gee whiz, now we got to pull it out of there. All right, so we'll get good at pulling it out of there if it doesn't float, But
right.
And you know, the really remarkable thing here, what we're talking about is you cannot use it. Okay, this is not a tool that you can pull out. You just have to create a way of being that your fallback position A is always going to be, what else can I learn from this situation right now? What am I not seeing? What new information can be gathered out of what we've just experienced? I saw what I saw, and as my dear friend Ken always says, there are infinite possibilities in any moment to experience it an infinite possibility way, right? So there's no rightness or wrongness in that. How do we find out, what do you got? What do you got? What do you got?
I like it.
I like this conversation.
Yeah.
So let's move back on to, well, what's the next thing for us to talk about? We've talked about synergy, synchronicity, and I guess I could say this, but I had an engineering buddy who called synchronicity the law of shit luck. Okay. And, you know, he said, sometimes despite your best efforts, things work, you know, and he was a really wonderful man. And he said, you know, he would come over and we'd find something going on in the manufacturing process. And he would look at it. He says, I don't know how they were making this work. I really don't. It shouldn't have worked. It can't work, but they're making it work. And I said, well, you know, let's go find out why and how, you know, it didn't go a predictable way that shouldn't work in this process the way that you designed it. And almost always that turned into a change in his documented process to allow for this new kind of interesting thing that happened by accident.
Right. But you know what's so interesting, if I can add to this, we were talking before about how important it is for people to learn. And the only way you do that is by figuring out how to get through the challenges that you have in whatever situation you're dealing with. So if you have an obstacle, there's a wall there. You can't just say, oh, there's no way through and give up, because then you're not learning anything. You have to figure out, okay, can I go around it? Can I go above it? Can I go through it? Can I go under it? Can I, like, what? There's so many different ways that you might be able to do it that you're not even aware of. And so pulling from the people that you are connected and collaborating with and getting more information about how you can overcome it allows you to do it. And then you learn something. And then the next obstacle is even that much, hopefully, you know, a lot of them won't be as hard because you'll have learned something. But it never stops. Of course, we all know that, right?
Never, ever. As long as
it never stops.
You know, as long as you're moving, there's going to be things that, you know, that are like that you're just going to come across. While
you got to embrace it and like it. Like, I love to solve problems. I think that they're fun to solve a problem. So
interesting, the perspective on that. I had a dear friend, another engineer, and of course he went away to a long weekend training, and he came back and he said, Bill, he said, we got this really cool distinction over the weekend. And you know what? We don't have any problems around here. We just have challenges. And I said, okay, so what's a challenge? He said, well, challenge is a more powerful way to look at a problem. Challenges, are you up to it? Can you make this work? You know, all the rest of that. And then about a month and a half later, after whipping challenge on the entire manufacturing floor, you know, we had no more problems anymore. That word went right out of the culture. And then it was, everybody was having a challenge, and people would come in and, you know, sit in my office and they go, I'm having a challenge with my 9-year-old son right now, or I'm having a challenge with my car, or whatever. And then the guy went away to another 3-day weekend seminar, and he came back again and he says, guess what, Bill? We don't have any challenges around here anymore. He said, we have opportunities. and I said, what in the hell are they feeding you over there over the weekend, right? So he always came home, and he was 10 times more excited every single time. And every time he came back in, now we have an opportunity. And when we would have these empowerment meetings in the middle of the shop floor, and he'd come in and he'd gather everybody around, and he goes, who's got an opportunity today? And everybody go, oh boy, an opportunity. I want a piece of that, you know? So
That's great.
yeah, from a problem to a challenge to an opportunity that everybody can be a success in, even if they don't do anything other than observe,
Mhm.
Unbelievable the difference that made in the meetings that we had.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah. I do too. Can you tell?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it speaks so much to view, the power of the view,
Yeah.
and, the lens that you look through, and also recognizing that not everybody looks through the same lens, So, and if you don't ask that question, like, it's funny. I mean, whenever we would have like two team members or there's some tension about whatever, we would practice stopping and just asking. Someone has to ask the question, what is the result we're trying to produce? Because they might be thinking in terms of two different results, and you don't know that unless the question's asked and you figure out, are you guys even looking at the same side of the building right now? So, and it's interesting how often, like, we would all laugh because someone would stop and you knew that's what they were going to ask, and we'd all laugh because all of a sudden we'd stop paying attention to what we were seeing and we'd start getting curious about what everybody else was seeing, so we could figure out how to look at the same thing together and then work through it from there. So that language shift from, problem to challenge to opportunity, you're looking at different things.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.